Hi there BookTube, it's Eleanor here. I'm just going to do a brief wrap up of what I've read this week, and then I'm going to show you some of the books that I'm thinking that I might read next week. I haven't fully decided what I want to read, and I like to have a bit of variety and a bit of choice. I'm just going to show you a few of the books that I've got on my pile that I'm thinking, might get to those next. So, trying to buy first issues of various comics that I hear about on BookTube and through friends, just to give them a go, see if I enjoy them, and if I am, then I'll continue on. I tried Rat Queen's issue 1 this week, and although I loved the artwork, the story and the characters weren't really for me. So I gave this issue 3 stars, but I won't be continuing with the series. Next, continuing with the Cressley Cole Arcana series, which I've really been enjoying. You might have heard me talk about Poison Princess in my last week's wrap-up. I managed to get Endless Night, which is the second in this series, from the library, and it didn't disappoint. I absolutely loved it. It's just quick, fast-paced, action-packed. It's really, really good. It's just something you can get totally lost in. It's exactly what I want sometimes, and it's all about a group of young people who have abilities to do with tarot cards, and they're in a bit of a fight to the death. Only one can remain, and it's just really interesting, and it's a bit of a different concept on the dystopian post-apocalyptic type tale, and I loved it. 5 stars. Next, I read a book called Nowhere by John Robinson. This is about 100 children that are in a prison system, and we don't really know why they're there. They all claim to be innocent. None of them have any recollection of doing what they're being told they've done, and it seems to be some sort of conspiracy with the government and a bit brainwashing, and they're trying to break out. And I found this all a little bit confusing. I found the book confusing, and I wasn't really sure about the plot, and I wasn't really invested in any of the characters. It seemed the writing didn't work for me, so unfortunately I gave this 2 stars because it just really wasn't for me. Next, it's the start of October, and so it was the start of the Goodreads BookTube Reading Buddies Spooky Reads for October. I picked 3 books from the list of books that had been chosen for this challenge. Firstly, I Am a Serial Killer by Dan Wells. Secondly, Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. And then thirdly, Nosferatu by Joe Hill. I started this week with I Am a Serial Killer, and it was good. I was expecting it to be scary, and it wasn't that scary. I find things that are unrealistic, not something that could happen in real life, not as scary. So in a way that was a plus for me, and a nice little sort of meander into the horror type genre. But I gave this 3 stars, and it was okay. It's about a 15-year-old boy who lives in a mortuary. His mum and aunt run the mortuary, and he thinks he might be a serial killer. He's seeing a psychologist who thinks he might be a sociopath, and there is a killer on the loose in his town, and the first body comes into the mortuary. It intrigues him. He decides he wants to find out more, and it just follows that. It was okay. It just wasn't great. And then lastly this week, I read Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. I thought, seeing as I'd started the scary books, I would just carry them on and almost not get them out of the way, but, scare myself good and proper and just build up the tension. So I went for the next one, which I thought might not be quite so scary, and I'm building up to Nosferatu perhaps next week. So Annihilation was a really interesting story. It started out quite slow. It was beautifully written and interesting, but it was very descriptive, and I thought, oh no, it's going to be one of those books that everyone loves and that I don't get on with because not a lot happens and it's a lot of talking about nothing. And then all of a sudden, like bam, it just went, and then everything started happening, and it was really, really good from then on in. I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars. I think I'm going to read the other 2 in the trilogy Possibly not this month, but I'm going to look and see if I can get them from the library and give those a go too, because it was a really interesting concept and a good book. I enjoyed it. So now I want to talk to you about the books that are on my tentative TBR for next week. Firstly, I want to try and get to the second part of The Storm of Swords. I'm doing this with the BookTube Reading Buddies for October. There's a couple of us that are going to be reading this second part, with the aim then in November to start on the Feast of Crows. So I really want to get to this. It was starting to heat up and I hear this is a really, really good book. So I'm quite excited for that. Next, I've heard about Retribution Falls by Chris Whidding from a number of booktubers, especially Nicole at Nicole's Adventures in SFF, Estelle from Ordinenta, and Today in Jen's Library. And I believe that they've been buddy reading, the three of them together, and they've read the first two in the series and they're now moving on to the third. And I thought, well, they explained it as sci-fi pirates, action-packed fun. What more could you ask for, really? So I'm definitely going to try and get to this at some point. Another book that I'm really interested in reading is called The Bees by Liline Paul. This book is, from what I can gather and what I've read, about Flora, who is a bee, and it's about their hierarchy. She starts out as a worker bee and it's about her working her way through the ranks. It doesn't normally happen. Bees tend to stick to their job roles and she's a bit of an anomaly, and it's about the queen bee. And yeah, I just think it sounded really interesting, and I'd seen it or heard about it on a podcast a while ago, and I saw it at the library and I thought, right, impulse, I'm going to give this a go. Another book that's really piqued my interest recently is The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey. This is a sci-fi book, I believe, and I'll just read you a little bit on the back. I don't know an awful lot about this book, and to be honest, sometimes I like to go into them not knowing too much because it's sort of a nice surprise then, but I'll read you the bit on the back. Every morning Melanie waits in her cell to be collected for class. When they come for her, Sergeant Parks keeps his gun pointed at her while two of his people strap her into the wheelchair. She thinks they don't like her. She jokes that she won't bite, but they don't laugh. So, yeah, that one sounds like it's intriguing. Perhaps superpowers or something like that. So, yeah, definitely want to try this one soon. And then lastly, if I'm feeling really, really brave, I'm going to try Nosferatu by Joe Hill. I'm a little bit scared about this one. It sounds a bit creepy. A man in a 1938 Rolls-Royce Wraith kidnapping children, taking them to Christmas land, and them coming back mental. That sounds really, really scary. So it'll have to depend on what sort of mood I'm in, whether I pick this one up. I may have to leave it a little bit longer, but we shall see. Anyway, that's what I read this week and what I potentially plan to read next week. I'm hoping to get to these. I've got a few other books that I might like to pick up, so I'm just going to play it a bit by ear. But I wanted to show you some of these books that I picked up from the library recently. So if you've read any of these books and you think there's one I should start with in particular, then please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I shall be hopefully uploading a Cheltenham video when I get back from Cheltenham, and I'll see you soon. Okay, bye BookTube.